Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quadrant for Politics, the podcast where we discuss news and politics from a conservative and libertarian perspective. My name is Riley, and I'm here with my friend and co-host Matt. We are a conservative and libertarian perspective podcast. However, we are welcoming to people from all over the political compass. We like to have an open discussion about things because we can always learn from other people's opinions. Today's date is December 20th, 2018. Be sure to check us out on Soundcloud and YouTube. Preferably Soundcloud, that's a little bit better of a service to use for listening to podcasts. Also, we pay a premium for that. And also, please like, subscribe, comment, favorite, all that kind of good shit. And also send us emails at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. That's the number 4, not spelled out 4. We would love to hear from you guys. We love reading comments on the air. Anyways, today's podcast, we have two things going on. First, we're going to start with our grab bag question that we do on every main episode of this podcast. That's a lot of fun. And then the main topic of the day is we're going to be discussing the Electoral College. Specifically, the challenging question of the day is, do we need the Electoral College? Without further ado, let's begin. Matt, do you want to pick the grab bag question?
I do. I'm always the one to pick that.
All right, while Matt is picking this, just a heads up, these grab bag questions are from the political compass test, which I say every time is not something we fully stand behind, but it is fun to do. And this is just a good icebreaker to get the conversation started. We do not know what this question will be about, but hopefully it's a good one.
We're about to know.
You should pick one there, Matt.
I'm picking one. I always like to take a little while. Okay, question 62 out of 62.
The last question on the test?
Yes.
Nice.
These days, openness about sex has gone too far.
Okay, so that is the statement.
Oh, that's the statement, and then the answers agree, disagree, strongly agree.
Okay, so can I read it again?
Yes, absolutely.
These days, openness about sex has gone too far. What do you think about this, Matt?
Well, as a good conservative Christian, I would say that I agree. Not that I think we need to limit anybody's free speech or free expression within reason, but I don't think anything is good. I don't think anything good has come from the more openness about sex. We see people with lower self-esteem trying to get to higher standards of beauty based on how their own gender and the other gender sees them. And STDs are higher than they used to be. Unwanted pregnancies are higher than they used to be. Abortions are higher than they used to be. And this is all because of the sexual revolution, where as long as it feels good, it's okay. You should do what makes you feel good. And ultimately, the people who disagree to this question are people who say we should say what's on our mind. Nothing should be sugar-coated. We should never, don't hide anything, because then you're denying yourself, denying who you are. And so I would say I disagree to this one.
You mean you agree?
I agree that.
You agree, or you strongly agree?
I'd say I'd strongly agree, because if we don't have any discussion about sex, then it's the opposite. We're repressed. People don't know exactly what to do. There's a lot of shame behind it.
So you mean you just agree, you don't strongly agree?
Exactly. I just agree. Strongly disagree gives the impression like sex shouldn't be discussed ever.
You mean strongly agree?
What? Am I getting these backwards?
Yeah, you're getting them backwards. These days, openness about sex has gone too far.
Okay, I agree. I do not strongly agree, because if I strongly agreed, I'd be saying, it seems like it wouldn't be saying like just these days. It would be saying like, let's go back a couple hundred years to where you couldn't talk to your parents about this at all. You couldn't,
Yeah.
If you had any, like women, back in the 50s, if you had an unwanted child, your mother either took you to have it in secret or took you to have an abortion, and it was never talked about again, to where now we can talk about these things. But when it says these days, the last 20, 30 years, I think, yeah, it's gone too far, but that's the world we live in.
I would say I'm a strongly disagree person. I do not think that it's gone far enough. And the reason why is kind of response to everything you have to say. Are you
Sorry.
just your reaction to me giving my
I'm just
opinion
grabbing my
is
head with a
face
little.
palm and like, oh my god, I have a headache already because I got to hear fucking Riley share his opinion.
Pretty much, that's how it always is. When I hear your opinion, it's just like, what garbage is this? Okay, so we say we're conservative and libertarian. Really, it's you're libertarian. I'm conservative. We don't really like. We meet a little bit.
Actually, this is the first question where we've had a pretty strong disagreement.
No, I think it's like, I think we've had two where we've had.
See, we're mostly together on most things. Anyways, let me tell you why I strongly disagree that openness about sex has gone too far. The reason why is responses to everything you had to say, where you think that it has led to bad things. I disagree. I think it's led to good things. I think being so open about sex I disagree with what you said about how it raised beauty standards. I think if anything it lowered beauty standards because now both men and women can say, hey, I'm attracted to chubby people. And the dad bod craze got popular and it was like men were like, wait, I don't have to be super buff to get a hot chick. There are some hot chicks that like chubby dudes, and women don't have to feel bad about liking chubby dudes. And then there's men who are like, yeah, dude, I'm a chubby chaser. I like fat chicks because they're softer to fuck, And so I feel like it's led to you can be more comfortable with who you are and you don't have to live up to these unrealistic expectations. I think there's it's led to better, like, less amounts of kink shaming. So like I think foot fetishes are really fucking weird, and I think all the foot fetish porn on the internet's like there's too much of it, and I run into it all the time, and it's like I'm not interested in this, go away, and it's constantly clogging up my feed of porn. However, it's like people who have
Wait, you have a feed?
Well, I mean, I check it like every day.
It's not something you shamefully erase.
No, no, I don't care about who knows I look at porn and what kind of porn I look at.
Oh my gosh,
it's all legal, so that's all that matters. But it's like people who do have a foot fetish. It's like that's more of an open thing. It's like girls would be like, yeah, you can worship my feet. I don't give a fuck. And you don't have to. It doesn't have to be so weird. And like if the BDSM community feels like they've been more accepted. I think that it's led to better education about sex. It's like. I'm watching King of the Hill right now, and one of the earliest episodes, they talk about sex, where Piggy has to learn about sex on her own, and she goes to teach Bobby, and Bobby says, "You mean?" She's like, "What do you know about sex?" And he's like, "You mean the penis and the vagina?" And she doesn't even respond. She just gets out of the room and walks out because she was so repressed as a kid. Like her daughter or her mother, the way she was taught sexual education was given a book about flowers. Like this is your sexual education. It's a book about flowers. That was the joke they made in the show. But it's kind of realistic, is that if we're not open about sex, you don't really learn about it. I think that not learning about sex can lead to more STDs and unwanted pregnancies instead of the other way around. I don't have the stats right now. However, I do know that unwanted pregnancies are really high in states like Mississippi, where they have really conservative sexual education, and they're lower in states.
Well, it's also where they have less abortion clinics, but yeah.
That's true, yes. I think that the sexual revolution has been a good thing. I think it's made it more willing to be a conversation, and so that we can learn things from each other, and that things are more open. I think it's done good for the LGBTQ community. I don't see anything that's wrong with it so far, other than praising pedophiles.
Pedophiles, NAMBLA.
But that's not even like a huge thing. Like if you praise pedophiles on the internet, you will get attacked by a ton of people. However, that community is slowly growing, or it's just slightly bigger than it ever was. But overall, I think that the sexual revolution and being open about sex is a good thing. So I strongly disagree with this statement.
Okay.
Do you have any responses to what I said?
I think the fallacy in what you're saying is that there needs to be openness about it. It's not, we're not talking about openness about all of our feelings, on our previous talks about gun control, we talked about if people can if people repress their feelings, they might, you know, go out and shoot up their school or become violent. As towards sexual expression, I don't think is something that is wholly necessary in the way that we're doing it as a society.
Well, I could see someone getting sexually frustrated and decide to take it out on another person. Whereas if they were able to feel more open in their sexuality, then that wouldn't be an issue.
Yes, I mean that is a possibility. You're right.
Polyamorous relationships. It's like if someone who's a poly person who's interested in having multiple sexual partners, and we live in a society where that's completely unaccepted, you have to be monogamous. Then all of a sudden they're just cheating on their spouse, and the person who married them, who's a completely monogamous person, they get hurt emotionally. And if the guy that she's with, I don't know why I'm saying guy and woman, but if the person they're with becomes violent because they don't want to cheat on their spouse, but they're feeling sexually unsatisfied, that's an issue. And I think that just being more open in society is always a good thing. I'm not necessarily saying that when you're having a casual conversation with someone, you can be like, yeah, I like shitting into my girlfriend's mouth. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. I'm just saying that society being more open about it is, it leads to the better, but it still shouldn't be small talk necessarily. But studies show that people are more willing to talk about what they do in the bedroom than their paycheck. Isn't that interesting?
It's, I mean, it's what we've come to, and I'm just saying that I, like, yay, we're more open about it. How does that serve society? How does that serve an individual? I don't know necessarily that the pros you've mentioned outweigh the cons that I've mentioned. So I would.
Well, we also disagree on a big point, which is abortion. I think abortion's a good thing, and you think it's a bad thing. So, in my favor, the discussion about sex has gone too far. You think it has gone too far because you think it's led to more abortions. I don't think it has gone too far because I don't think abortion's a bad thing. I think that, that's not obviously the whole discussion, but that's a big part of it.
That's because, and again, it's not that just that. If we want to be completely honest about it, it's because you and I have different opinions on right and wrong, and that's because you're led by, world morality, and I'm led by biblical morality, and in that sense, I don't necessarily subscribe to the notion that because it feels good you do it, or because you feel better you do it. There's people can end up cheating on their wives or husband, and it feels really great in that moment, but later on it doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you become numb to it to where you don't care. Mm-hmm. A guy can start sleeping with prostitutes, and his wife might have an idea, she might not, but you go from marriage to then guilty sex to then becoming numb, and sex addiction's higher. I just think all the cons are because of where we've come since the sexual revolution, and that's not to say that I want us to go back to the 1800s or even early 1900s. It's not to say that I support what goes on in the Middle East, to where if a woman's raped, she's automatically guilty of a crime. I think there's a happy middle, and we've gone way far to the left of that happy middle. So,
okay.
And that would just about be my final word.
Cool. Let's go ahead and jump into our main topic of the day. Do we need the Electoral College? So how should we do this? I guess we should start with...
my quiz?
Well, let's start with our basic thoughts about it. So what do you think about the Electoral College?
Here's what I think about the Electoral College. I want to make this very clear. I am going to be arguing from the point of... Is the Electoral College democratic? Is it American? Should it be legal? Does it fall under our principles? I will say I definitely understand the frustration of people who say, why not the popular vote? The popular vote makes complete sense.
Oh, I guess we should describe what the Electoral College is real quick
Well,
the
for right
audience.
now, let's just say,
Okay.
Um, okay, let's describe the Electoral
Okay.
College. So we don't elect our president.
Do a short form version of it.
We don't elect our president by how many millions of people voted versus candidate A versus candidate B. Instead, it's a winner take all based on state for the most part. Two states have slightly different, but kind of the same, to where each state has a certain number of voters, totaling 538. And so a president doesn't need, 51 million people versus the 50 million. What he needs is 270 votes to become president, because ultimately the citizens of a state, all their votes are going to the state's electors, and then the electors in turn vote for the president. The official results are done later in December, once they're actually certified. But you pretty much know on election day or within a few days, because there's faithless electors, which we'll talk about, but we can pretty much rely on the fact that there's not going to be so many that it's going to sway the results.
So continue what you were saying about the Electoral
College. So what I'm saying is I am not going to say the Electoral College is better than the popular vote, or the idea that we should have a popular vote. What I'm saying is there are things that I think there are people who get so obsessed with the fact that the president's not picked by the popular vote that they overlook what the Electoral College does well and why it does serve a purpose, even now in the year 2018. Because, it used to be everything was done with delegates, back before the 1820s. I don't know the exact year. Some states didn't even do it by popular vote. It was New York at one point, and then a couple of other states I just remember reading about, though. New York didn't let its citizens pick the electors. It was the legislator in New York, and whatever other states. So talking about it from today's standpoint, though, there are a lot of benefits to it. And so that's kind of where I'm going to be coming from. So not whether or not it's good, or not whether or not it's necessary, but I guess I'll be talking about when it's necessary and why it's sometimes necessary.
Okay. My thought on the Electoral College is I'm against it for the most part. I see why some people like it, and I see how it can still be considered technically democracy. However, it's representative democracy. But for the most part, I'm against it because it takes away power from the people. It's a big government idea. It's elected officials making decisions for us, and they don't always have to go with what we have to say. And I think that overall it's flawed. I think the current Electoral College that we have right now is severely flawed, and I think it makes it so the elector or whoever's running for president only focuses on certain areas of the state. And I know that people who want to get rid of the Electoral College, or people who want to keep the Electoral College, say that if you get rid of it, they'll just focus on the big cities, which I have a statistic about that I want to talk about. But I think that if we keep the Electoral College, it needs to be severely redefined, and it needs to be changed the way it works. Or the best solution is to just put the power back in the hands of the people and let us do the popular vote. And if we do a mistake by the popular vote, then it's our mistake, and we can wait until the next election to fix that vote. I think I believe in personal responsibility, and sometimes you have to learn by failing. And if we burn our country into the ground because of some choices that we made, then that's our fault. And I think that we can also come back from that.
Okay.
So what do you want to do here? Do you want to go through my fun facts? Do you want to do your quiz? Do you want to just discuss it?
Let's do the quiz.
Let's do the quiz.
Let's see what you know.
It's To everyone who's listening, we are a little bit late on this podcast. We did all of our research like a couple weeks ago, but I got sick, Matt got sick, I moved, so we're way behind. It's been a little while since
And
I did all my research.
I also tried to tell Riley I really wanted to talk about this, but I didn't think, like we're in between a presidential election. Why do we talk about this now? Riley said, "Hey, let's do it." And I said, "Okay, I'm excited about that topic." And ultimately, because of what happened in 2016, it's still on people's minds and there's still new developments with it. So I guess it is somewhat relevant, maybe not relevant to the day, but for the time, sure. So,
all right, let's do this quiz. So this is a quiz that Matt made for me.
All right. Riley, what is the lowest number of states a candidate could win and still become president?
Is it a multiple choice?
It is. It's either A, 6, B, 11, C, 19, or D, 24.
24.
The correct answer is 11.
You can win with just 11 states?
Yes, if you take the 11 biggest states, which are Texas, California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, North Carolina.
Man, that sounds like a really good reason to get rid of the Electoral College.
Anyway, it states that probably wouldn't getting California and New York to vote with Texas, Ohio, and Florida,
Yeah.
probably not going to happen, but it's possible.
Right.
But we'll get more into the pros and cons later.
All
For
right.
now, shut up and take the quiz. Okay, so you failed. Okay. All states divvy their votes on a winner-take-all basis, except these two: Oklahoma and New Hampshire, Arkansas and New Jersey, Nebraska and Maine, Wyoming and West Virginia.
Nebraska and Maine.
That is the correct answer.
Is that the correct answer? The only reason I guess that is because Maine has the stripes through it on the Electoral College map.
Nice. Yeah. So the one-time Nebraska. So the way Nebraska and Maine do it is they give. So the way electors are assigned to a state, it's your number of representatives plus your number of senators. So basically, it's your number of representatives plus 2, because every state has 2 senators. So those 2 points for both Maine and Nebraska go to whoever wins the state. And then for the other 3, they break it up between their 3 electoral districts. And so in 2008, it was the one time that Nebraska ever gave a vote, or ever split its vote, giving the third district, which has, I think, what's the big Nebraska, like Omaha? I don't know. It's Nebraska, but anyway, they give that to Obama. And then Maine is the one time they split their vote was in 2016, with Trump getting the 2nd district. So those have both only split one time. Usually they vote the same way, but they can split because they split based on winner take all and the counties, or the districts. Okay, so in the 2016 election, which one of the following states did not have any faithless electors? A, Washington, B, Texas, C, New Mexico, or D, Hawaii?
And a faithless elector is someone who doesn't vote with the popular vote of the state?
Yes. So basically they're told, go and vote this way because our state did, and they say, I don't have to, I'm going to vote.
3 of those states did have a faithless voter and one of them didn't?
Yes.
And what were the states again?
Washington, Texas, New Mexico, and Hawaii.
I'm going to guess Washington.
The correct answer was actually New Mexico. So Hawaii had either 2 or...
Wait, for some reason I feel like New Mexico was the one that did have a faithless elector.
So there were actually 3 states, and I don't have them right now, to where their faithless electors...
Yeah, because someone voted for Ron Paul.
Okay, that was in Texas.
Oh, it was in Texas.
So in Texas, okay. Texas had 2. It was one for Ron Paul and I think one for John Kasich. I don't know for sure, but the 2 people who were supposed to pick Trump picked different Republicans.
Okay.
In Hawaii, there were, I think, 3 faithless electors that voted for maybe 2 that voted for Bernie Sanders. And then in Washington, I think we had 5, which was the most this entire last election, because we had somebody vote for Bernie Sanders, and then somebody voted for Faithful Spotted Owl, which was like a Native American tribes person. Um, Maybe it was a couple more who voted for Bernie Sanders, but they were all messed up. So like it just didn't even out. So basically, what I was saying though is there were other states with faithless electors. However, these states are the ones whose legislator did not say we're going to replace them. So like I think Missouri had someone who faithlessly um, submitted their vote, and the legislator of Missouri said, okay, we're going to replace that person. So the vote didn't actually go against them. So the Electoral College vote officially was like 306 to 232. After you take away the votes, it's like 304 to 227 for 2016.
I think that vote for Ron Paul technically counted as a libertarian vote because I think he's technically libertarian right now.
Okay, I think you're missing the point.
Like, I'm just saying, gotta represent where representation's due.
We have to have a whole episode on your delusion of libertarianism. Okay, which president has the record for the biggest electoral college victory with 523 to 13, with his opponent winning only Minnesota and D.C.? Is that FDR, Eisenhower, Nixon, or Reagan?
Fuck, man. Reagan.
That's correct.
Oh, nice. Good deal.
And that's when he ran against Walter Mondale.
And he was really unliked, right?
Who? Walter Mondale?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, he did the same thing John McCain did, is he picked a woman as his running mate.
Oh, really?
To hopefully get, and this was back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Hopefully get some more votes. He ended up winning his own state by like I think less than 1%.
Wow.
And then he won D.C., which always goes Democrat.
Yeah.
And then which president has the record for the biggest geographical win in the Electoral College, losing only Massachusetts and D.C., winning 520 to 17? Was it FDR, Eisenhower, Nixon, or Reagan?
Fuck, man. I don't know much about these presidents. I'm going to guess Reagan again.
This time it was Nixon.
Wait, I guess that's a dumb answer because you already told me what Reagan lost.
Well, but he could have...
Wait, can I guess again?
He could have done separately in a different election.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that was Nixon in 1972. That was actually, I think, his Wait, was that his re-election? Yes, that was his re-election. So the one where he, got caught cheating and trying to sneak into the Democrats' whatever.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about that.
He didn't need to because he had 500 votes. So anyway, yeah, that was what Watergate was about. But
oh, really? That's what Watergate was about something else. It wasn't about voting.
It was about like his people sneaking into the Democrats' secret private crap. I don't know.
Anyways.
True or false? A president and vice president cannot be from the same state because electors cannot vote for a president and vice president from the same state.
False.
That is false, with a little bit of a twist to it. The twist is that electors from one state cannot vote for both the president and vice president from their own state. So this would have been a problem in the year 2000 when George Bush won by one vote, 271. If he'd picked somebody from Texas, which technically he did because Dick Cheney switched his address from Texas to Wyoming, which later they tried to challenge, they wouldn't have been able to do both of that. And Dick Cheney would have fallen short of 270. So technically, as long as you have the margin, you can do it.
Yeah.
The vice president and the president will get different amounts of electors. True or false? The closest popular vote ever was in 1960, JFK versus Nixon, but the Electoral College was a different story with JFK winning 303 votes.
That sounds like a trick question, so I'm going to say false.
Okay, the answer is actually true.
Damn
so it was the closest popular vote.
Motherfucker.
It was like a difference of 100,000.
Yeah.
Even the one of 2,000 was like 500,000 votes, and there have even been other closer ones, but 100,000 was the closest. But JFK, because of how the states are laid out, won 303.
Yeah.
True or false? Of the 5 times the presidency was not given to the winner of the popular vote, all were instances where the popular winner received only the plurality, meaning most votes, but never a majority higher than 50%. So I'm asking each time.
Can you repeat that again?
Yes. True or false? Each of the 5 times we've picked somebody who.
My research shows only 4 times the popular vote loss.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Each of the 5 times the presidency was not given to the winner of the popular vote.
Right.
Each of them were instances where they only received a plurality, meaning they received the most votes, but they did not receive a majority. None of them received a majority.
It's true or false?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a trick question, so I'm going to say false.
It is false. Wasn't a trick question, though. 4 of the times... Okay, well, of the 4 times you're thinking of, everybody was below 50%.
Yeah.
Which is part of my thing with the Electoral College, is that when you want to say Hillary Clinton should become president because she won 48% of the vote, you're saying that 52% of the people who did not vote for her, it's a democratic decision to make her president. And I'm not just talking about those 2. I'm talking about any election, which is where the Electoral College comes in, which I'll get to later. But anyway, in 1876, Rutherford Hayes won with 47.92%. Sam Tilden lost, having 50.14% of the Electoral College, which that right there is what I will say would make me definitely against the Electoral College, is when you have results like that. Okay, last question. True or false? Of the 5 times the presidency was given to the person in second place in the popular vote, one of these times also included a person who got second place in the Electoral College.
True.
That is true, and I think your notes have something about that.
Maybe.
Because that's the difference why there's 4 and 5. But we'll get to that later. So what did you want to talk about?
How many did I get right? How many questions were there?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 5 out of 9, which
5 out of 9. That's a majority right there. I'm president.
That is okay. There you go.
All right. Thank you for the quiz, Matt. I appreciate it. That was fun. I want to I read some fun facts for you.
Okay.
And you can interrupt me at any time if you want. And these are fun facts. Some of them are in my favor, but some of them are just fun facts, I guess. Let me see. Every state gets three votes to start, and then they're divvied up after that as far as the population goes. So that's why some of the smaller states get more votes, is because they immediately get 3 to start, even though they would originally only have 2, because then those 2 are added in, so they get 5 total.
I have no idea what you're talking about, because the way they are assigned is the number of House of Representatives plus the number of senators, which everybody has at least 1 representative per state. Everybody has 2 senators, therefore you get 3.
Yeah, but they get more on top of that as well. The video I watched told me that.
I would rewatch the video, because I guarantee if you went through and saw the House of Representatives by each state and added 2 to it, you'd get the number of Electoral College votes. But anyway.
I guess my next one. U.S. territories are the only place in the universe where Americans can't vote for president because they do not have electors. So that's saying places like Puerto Rico, where it's a U.S. territory, it's not a state. Those are the only places in the universe where Americans can't vote, because Americans can vote when they're overseas, when they are American citizens living abroad, or people on the spaceships can vote too. They can send in their ballots. I'm not sure how they do it, if it's electronic or whatnot, but people who are in a spaceship can vote. But if you're in a U.S. territory, you cannot vote for president.
Even if you're a citizen of a U.S. state, and you happen to be in?
Yeah, even if you're a citizen of a U.S. state and you go to a U.S. territory,
what if you're soldiered, or what if you're a soldier stationed in?
Shit out of luck, bro.
Are you sure about that? Even if you're a soldier?
Sure
okay, cool, interesting. Gonna
So
just jot that down.
that's a problem with like Puerto Rico, is that because they're not a state, as soon as a Puerto Rican landed on Florida or whatever the closest state was, or just went to America, they would have the exact same rights as us. But because they live in Puerto Rico, they cannot vote in our national elections, or for the president at least.
But one spot where they do carry some power is in picking the candidates, because they do have a proportional amount, I think, in both the Democrat and Republican Party of primary votes. But you're right, and it used to be the same way with Washington D.C. Washington D.C. used to have no voters, but some person went and complained, and now they have 3, even though they have exactly 0 representatives and 0 senators. Like, I would understand giving them 1, but they have 3.
So that's something I would say is in my favor for getting rid of the Electoral College, just because they're American citizens and they can't vote for president because of the Electoral College.
I'm going to write that down on our follow-up episode. I'm going to come up with a response to that.
All right. New York City is the biggest city with 8 million people. It accounts for only 2.6% of the population. The top 90 cities would only account for 19.4% of the American population. The reason why I brought that up is because the people who have fear of getting rid of the Electoral College think that the candidates will only call to the big cities. Even if they went to the top 90 big cities, they would only be accounting for 19.4% of the population. So that's the people who say that they would focus only on the cities. It's just not the truth. The presidents have to favor everyone, because only getting 19.4% of the popular vote will not win you the election.
Okay, but I don't think it's just about just that single big city. It's, New York City's going to draw on people from the other big cities around it. Same with, LA. You also got San Francisco right above
We're talking about the 90 biggest cities. The 90 biggest cities have 19.4% of the population. So a lot of the population is spread out among the smaller cities. So the people who have the fear that if you get rid of the Electoral College, that you will, the presidents will only favor the big cities, that is completely inaccurate.
Okay, that's that you're right. That is a good one against my argument, because I'm essentially arguing the pro, because my argument is that it is a democratic way to elect a president. So I'm going to look into it and have a good response for you.
Let me see. This one, the Electoral College makes it possible to win with only 22% of the popular vote. If you rig the game and you get the states with the most electors and the lowest population, you can win the election with only 22% of the popular vote.
If you were to take those 11 states I was talking about, and each of them won like 50.0001%, and theoretically every other state voted completely like 100% for the other person, yeah, you could. That's generally not how it's ever going to work out.
It shows a system that's flawed.
Well, we'll get into why the popular vote's flawed as well.
My next point, 4 times in American history has the popular vote lost. 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016.
1876, what?
1888, 2000, and 2016. That is over a 5% failure rate. That is unacceptable for the most important person in the world.
Hold on. Before, there was also the one I was talking about there was also the election of 1800, and that is one where, here's the problem: is you prefer multiple parties, right? You'd rather more than just Republicans and Democrats won. Yeah. Well, in 1800, this happened. You had 4 major people on the ballot. The biggest one, I think, received, and I am really stupid, I don't have the names and statistics in front of me like a prepared person would, but the biggest one had like 27% of the vote, and then it was like below that it was like 22, and then like 18, and then whatever. Do the math, My math's not perfect, but I'm saying it wasn't just like, oh, they got 44%, they should have become president. This was somebody who didn't even get a third of the population, because if you're doing not a 2-party system but more than 2 parties, how are you going to get a winner? So and what happened was it ended up going to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives picked the person who got the second most electoral votes, which was also the second most popular
Well, we
vote.
can have multiple elections, and whoever's the lowest on the list gets booted off, and then you vote again, and then the lowest person gets booted off. I don't know how many people.
Or it's called like ranked voting. Like, you could pick the people 1 through 5.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Which
too.
I'm not against that, but I would also I can explain why there is a problem with that. But
All right, let me see here. One of the reasons the Electoral College was created because the general population back then didn't know much about the candidates, which is definitely not the fact today. We know about who they had sex with. We know how they spend their money. We know their entire history. We just go on Wikipedia and we can learn everything about them. It's all over the news, all over the gossip. I think that shows that the Electoral College is an outdated thing, that it needs to be updated. A lot of things in this country need to be updated, frankly, because times have changed so drastically.
okay.
Let me see. In 24 states, electors do not have to side with their state's popular vote.
Yes, I'm strongly
Faithless
against
electors.
that. I'm against faithless electors. And actually, let me tell you what I'm also against. Because, instead of just you reading off your list, let's make part of this conversation. Part of what I'm against with the Electoral College is the electors. We could have the Electoral College and just
Without having physical
without having the physical people reporting to their state's capital,
Yeah.
and then those ballots being sent to Congress for the vice president to, like, that's all,
It would be a slight improvement.
That's bureaucracy. Instead, just take the frickin' numbers
Yeah.
that each state's allotted and get your winner there. So we don't have to deal with faithless electors and court cases and all the fines for the states that do have punishment. Because like Washington's one of the states that has a punishment. It's $1,000 fine. If your vote can tip the presidential election, might be worth the $1,000 for you to do that. So.
My final fun fact that I have here is that the Electoral College promotes a two-party system because it's winner take all for the states, and it just promotes a two-party system. So, my good friend John Adams, on October 2nd, 1780, one of the founding fathers, he said this: "There is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader in concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution."
Well, before John Adams, George Washington, in his outgoing statement, asked people, said, "I hope future people do not run on parties." He wanted everything to be nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's not the world we live in. So here's my thing with the Electoral College and why it's democratic is, one, you have situations like I mentioned, the election of 1800, where you have 4 people, and even though one of them maybe won 33%, that's still saying 2/3 of the people picked somebody else. And so what the Electoral College does is it says, okay, you reached that halfway mark, therefore you become president. Now that halfway mark, you might say, has no purpose, except with the states voting, the state votes going towards the total, people go, well, that's not fair. Except, one, you got to remember, different states have different traits. There's farmland, there's technology land, there's coal, there's mining, there's lumber. Every state specializes, and not just state, but territories, And granted, part of the problem is that the state lines were drawn before the concept of how we were going to divide the voting up. So if it was more regional, I would be more in favor of it, if it was like, okay, everybody who lives in this general area, but because the lines are drawn funky, that is a problem with it. But ultimately, one of the things that people who were for the 2016 results and who said, okay, the difference was 2.8 million. The thing is that in California, the difference was like 4.5 million. So the phrase became United States of America, not United States of California. In other words, just because California would have flipped the election so hard because they were so deeply blue, look at what else happened.
Yeah, but you have to remember that people, Republicans in California don't vote because they know that voting's worthless for them. And
isn't that also a? Okay, I guess that goes for your side, but yeah. So it. What I was going to say is it also.
No, absolutely. I understand that getting rid of the Electoral College and going just on the popular vote will lead to a very liberal government. But the thing is that I believe in the free market figuring itself out. And if we elect a bunch of liberals and find out that that's a bad way to run things, then we will fix that with the popular vote.
I think what's more of a threat to us electing a bunch of liberals is compulsory voting, which is required in a lot of places, and I think like 20 some countries where you are required to vote. Now the punishment's not usually too hard, and in some places you can even say no candidate, none of the above, or I choose to abstain, whatever. But for one, in America, that would be a forcement of our expression. And also, liberalism is the rational.
I don't think they could ever do that in our country.
I don't think they would, but let's say they did. Liberalism is the rational answer to when you present people with the generics of the two parties.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are going to pick the left because it makes more sense on paper, face value. It's once you start deconstructing these things, looking at them deeper, that the right makes more sense. And so that's why I would definitely be against that. And the reason I bring that up is because, one, that's what a lot of people are arguing now. But also, there's I think it's a real serious problem that California could have had, or not just California, Southern California could have had so much weight when the rest of the country, if we're talking size of the country, now granted there are a lot of people grouped down there, but do we want to give the voice of the farmers, of the coal miners, of all those people? Do we want to give the voice to the people in California, to the Hollywood actors who, or
well, you gotta remember it goes both ways. That liberals have their bad people too, but so do Republicans. Republicans have a lot of fucking trailer park hicks that are fucking retarded, and they're too lazy to go vote. They're too lazy to go get registered. If we made voting easier and based on the popular vote, that would incentivize them to go vote. It would increase Republican numbers so it would be a little bit more even of the playing field.
Except it wouldn't, because studies have consistently shown, and I think both sides of the aisle would agree with this, is that people who tend not to turn out to vote, especially registered voters, are Democrats. Democrats tend not to turn out to vote unless it's a candidate they really like, or unless things are more consequential, as to where Republicans will show up to the poll every single time. I'm pretty much a Republican, not in every single instance, but like 95% of the time I vote for the Republican candidate. I vote in the odd year elections when I'm picking a freaking city council person and the two initiatives on the ballot and who's going to be in charge of the ports or whatever, because those local elections matter to me. As to where a lot of people don't even show up for the midterms, and then then even more people show up for the presidential elections. So
I still think that Republicans would have more people vote for two reasons I've already mentioned. The Republicans in California who feel disgruntled, like they can't vote because they know they're going to lose anyways, and the Republicans who think it's too hard or just not worth it to go vote, the stupid Republicans.
Well, okay, well, the stupid Republicans, the thing about them, the trailer park ones, would we agree they're rural?
Oh, yeah.
So they're kind of spread out,
yeah.
Which is kind of my point, is that the United States of America shouldn't be, okay, we have a pocket of people up here in the Northeast, and we have a pocket of people down here in the Southwest. They get to decide the president. And another part of my argument is that each state is its own political system, and just like we're members of a country, we're members of a state, and each state has its own political interest. The federal government provides states with money. Um, our policies ultimately come from the federal government, and then we critique them as long as we don't go against the federal government's laws. We critique them. So my argument isn't just that, oh, well, you don't want just one party. It's that it's reasonable to say that a state gets a say in who becomes president. And so if 55% of your state is saying candidate A over candidate B, then ultimately the state's interest is going into that presidential election. So, and as far as the trailer park people, they're spread out across a bunch of states. But the number of Republicans would rise if we force people to vote.
I'm not saying force people to vote at all. I'm just saying make it easier and count on the popular vote, not the Electoral College. I think that would get people to show up.
Okay, so then one of my other arguments...
Because when I was growing up, I was taught you need to vote in the primaries, but don't care about the general election because your vote doesn't count.
Well, again, it depends on the state you live in. And yes, it would make more votes count, but there are also other problems. Let's think back to what election did I talk about? The 1960 election, Nixon versus Kennedy. A difference of 100,000 votes. Now imagine when, how Florida in 2000, well, you don't remember, but Florida in 2000 was separated by 537 votes. George Bush's brother was the governor, who excused himself from the election. Imagine having that on a national scale. So we have a president who wins or a candidate who wins by 500,000. We're not all of a sudden talking about 4 or 5 counties doing a recount, or even a whole state. We're talking about 50 different states, all the counties within them, all the districts within them, each state's superior court, and then federal court, their supreme courts coming to different decisions. Like I said to somebody online one time, if we depended on the popular vote, we still to this day would be waiting to find out who our president in the year 2000 was. But because we have a system in place, which I wasn't a huge fan of the fact that it was, a difference of 500,000 votes and then a difference of 1 electoral vote. Like, I get that. And ultimately what it shows is that the country was pretty split, and we had to have a system in place to reasonably give it to one person. It took us, 6 weeks after the 2000 election?
Isn't it a shame that we have to rely on just Florida for that?
Well, it wasn't just Florida. It's the fact that Florida was the state that had such the small difference. The national difference was 500,000. So my point is how much harder the election of 2000 took us. At least I think it was 5 weeks to go through, or 36 days, something like that. It took us 5 weeks to go through for just the state of Florida's results to get certified. If it would have been a difference of 500,000, they wouldn't have just cared about Florida. They would have cared about every other vote in the country. And I can't wait till till the electoral vote's gone, and then someday 2 presidents have a difference of 50, or 2 presidential candidates, have a difference of 50,000, and I will say, this is what I was talking about. Again, it's not that I firmly...
Why not just do the election over again?
A whole election over again?
Yeah.
That's genius. That's fiscally responsible.
I'm saying that our voting system's old and it needs to be updated and fixed. I don't know necessarily how to do that because I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm sure there's someone out there who has a decent solution. The fact that we have just incredible technology right now, and we're still voting with little fucking Scantrons that we took tests in school on.
But that's how it has to be.
The ballots, they punch a hole in it like it's fucking
voter fraud and voter suppression. You have to voter suppression and voter fraud are things you have to take into consideration. We are worried that Russians hacked our election in 2016. What will Americans do to their own election? You can't
There's
It's way too early to
I'm
depend on
not smart
computers.
enough to know the answers to that because I'm not very like technologically intelligent as far as that kind of stuff goes. But we all have a social security number, we all have a license ID. There's got to be a way to just like have a list of those, and then when someone votes under that one, they knock it off the list and showing that that person already voted.
Um, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, with computers, that's a hard answer. So I don't know. I want to talk about the 2016 election a little bit,
Okay.
and I want to discuss. I wish it wasn't like we're discussing Clinton and Trump because it makes my case a lot harder. But ultimately, let's look at what Trump did. Because he lost the popular vote, remember that.
Yeah.
But he turned states that hadn't been red for the first time since Reagan days. And granted, while he didn't win huge margins of those states, those were states Republicans weren't able to carry for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate, she only won his state by like a couple percent,
Mm-hmm.
He made it massive gains where other Republicans couldn't. And so that in itself is not a way to support the popular or to support to support the Electoral College. What I'm saying is we can see though from those differences that he definitely took the country in a different direction. And in fact, if you look at every single it was every single voting district in the US, I saw one where it was like the dot on there was how they voted, and then the arrow either pointed right to the red, and the longer the arrow, the more Republican they voted, and the longer the left blue arrow, the more Democrat. Pretty much the whole country moved to the right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think that I'm not sure what the overall point is you're trying to make, but if I can interject right there, I think there's a couple outside reasons that relate to that. I think that Hillary Clinton was a shitty candidate. I think
absolutely.
she ran a shitty campaign. I think that the fact that she cheated and got the DNC to support her over Bernie Sanders was a huge issue. And I think that before the election, all the news reports were saying that she was a surefire win. So people were like, we don't need to vote. So I think that if all those things had been lined up or had not been the way they were, I know that's just saying if A through Z were different, then she would have won. But there's a lot of shitty things that happened that really didn't need to happen. And if the Democrats had run if they had run Bernie Sanders, things might have turned out differently.
Oh,
and also
I mean, yeah, definitely, but they didn't.
Yeah, and so I'm saying that Trump's win isn't necessarily supportive of the Electoral College or is showing strength for him. It's showing that Hillary had a weak campaign, and there were a lot of things affecting why voters didn't show up and why things moved to the right. Because, as you said, conservative voters show up, whereas Democrats are known for not voting.
Well, and another big part is that a lot more of the country than we think are independent voters and people who, like, honestly, a week before the election are like, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. And I've always been astonished by that. Like, how do you not know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really also about moving that group of people one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so that plays a big role in it. So, like I said, it's not a perfect situation, but I would say it's not undemocratic because also one of my other points that I like to make is on what other federal decision do individual citizens have a say? We pick our senators who go onto the federal level to
but those
make
are all
decisions
based on
for
the
us.
popular vote.
They are. Okay, but how about the House of Representatives? Those
are also based on the popular vote.
They are, exactly. And so how about
Why not just get rid of the president and have the Senate and House of Representatives do all the work?
My point is, well, because you have to have checks and balances within the government, and you'd rather have 3 branches than 2 because, anyway. My point is that anytime, because Republican senators come from smaller states, smaller populated states, it tends to be that if something's along the party lines, the senators representing 150 million people lost, while the senators representing 114 million people won. So this isn't just about the Electoral College being unfair. It's also about and what I was trying to say was the Senate versus the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is a lot more fair because it's based on population throughout the state, as to where very important things are decided by the Senate, such as Supreme Court confirmations or any federal court confirmations.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you have to look is what the country wants on a popular level being decided by the Senate? And often cases, the answer is no. And we expect we have people at the federal level making decisions for us. And it's because they're making decisions all day long on minor little things that the everyday person who has a job can't make this into their job. And that's why we have other people make the decisions for us. So on no other issue or person on the federal level, nobody in the president's cabinet, nobody nominated to the FBI, the CIA, nobody nominated to any court does the individual citizen have a say. But on the president, we decide it's the one thing we should have a say, which I get it. It's the person who's the head of our country. But if the checks and balances are carried out properly, then your local elections should have a lot more of an impact than it really should be. Like your mayor and your city council have more of an effect in your life than your president does.
Yeah, all the way on the other side of the country from us.
Exactly. Well, and not just because of where they're located, but because of how, the power's divvied up. The federal government's supposed to be responsible for a short list of things, and then the state for more things. But
the federal government is taking those rights away from the states and deciding them for themselves.
Well, in some states,
So we are over an hour now.
Well, it's because I'm passionate, but...
What is your final word on the Electoral College? Do we need the Electoral College? Do you think it's democratic? Does it need to be changed? What do you think about the Electoral College? This is your final word.
I think it is non-perfect, a non-perfect way of electing the president that has many benefits in the long run, such as quicker election results, close national results, consistency across the country, representing all people, not just pockets of people. It's not a perfect system because you're right, it doesn't take who most people said. One other thing I want to bring up, sorry. I think the lowest a president has ever been elected with the popular vote was I think it was 34 or 39%. And I know Bill Clinton, the first time around, it was a three-way race. And he got 41% of the vote. So somebody tell me how it's democratic that we take somebody who 59% of people said, I do not want this person as the president, or at least I want somebody else, yet we put that person in office. The fact is I would support the popular vote 100% if it outdid the electoral vote. I do not ever think that in my perfect world where I make the rules, I would never say that, okay, you got 54% of the vote, but you know what? Sucks because, the other person got 312 electoral votes. That to me is garbage. But it's a way to pick our president when the country itself hasn't been able to agree on one person with a majority. So to say it's undemocratic, and in some ways it actually makes it more democratic, and it also allows states to have a say in the election. So I guess my final word is that it's not perfect, but it's not as bad as everybody else seems to think it is for the reasons I've said. And so that's my final word. One other thing I'd like to bring up, though, is this isn't just a left versus a right issue. I think a recent survey showed that about 85% of Democrats were against it. I think it was 65 or 70% of Republicans were against it, against the Electoral College, and the independents were somewhere in between. So I'm supporting a very unpopular opinion, but it's because I've taken the time to look more into some of these deeper reasons why it actually can be helpful and should be considered, at least in some of the situations, say when somebody doesn't reach 50%. So,
My final word on the Electoral College is the overall question of the podcast is, do we need the Electoral College? And I say no to that question. The question you wanted to ask is the Electoral College democratic? It is democratic. It's a representative version of democracy, but yes, it is democratic. But overall, my thought process on the Electoral College is the way it is right now is not good. I think there's a lot of problems with the Electoral College. I support the popular vote. I think that is the way to go. However, I am completely open to ideas of fixing the Electoral College and just making it run better and more fluid and making it represent the people more. I think that I believe in putting the power in the people, and I think that fixing the Electoral College to do that is what we need to do. I don't necessarily have that answer because I'm not that smart. I don't know. I don't have the ins and outs of exactly how everything works, but I think there is a solution out there that someone much smarter than me can figure out. I also think that, as a libertarian, I think of many outside the box ideas. Maybe we need to change up the presidency. Maybe we need to get rid of the president. Maybe we need to have multiple presidents. Maybe we just need to change up the executive branch so we vote for everyone who's in that office. So I think it just needs to change. That's what I'm supporting, is that the Electoral College needs to change the way it is right now. It's a broken system. It has an over 5% failure rate. I think that that's a problem. Cool. All right. So that was our episode on the Electoral College. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. Was there anything finally you wanted to say before we go?
I think I do have a way to fix it.
Oh, yeah?
Except I don't have it perfected. So I talked about ranked ballots. Let's say we have two candidates. What if we rated them like 1 through 5, being like 5, this is the person I really want, and then the second person you could give them like a 4 if you're like they're a reasonable second place, or you could give them like a 2, like if we have to,
Yeah,
and then like a 1 would be like this person must burn in hell, and then somehow got a calculation from that.
Yeah,
that's just one way. Obviously, then that would create a whole other slew of problems. Again, there's no perfect solution.
It sounds better to me than what we currently have.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, everything's got its pluses and minuses. The one thing about the popular vote is it's not automatically just the best way to do it, because 45% of people said one thing versus 40% of another group and 5% of another group.
Right.
So nothing else to really say other than keep an open mind about it, because there are reasons, there are ways it helps us, and there are reasons for it. Doesn't mean it's better than the popular vote, but if we got rid of it, consider some of the things I brought up. How do we answer those questions of
and we'll talk more about it if we get some comments on this stuff.
I'm sure we will.
We'll have a 7, this episode 7.5, and discuss the comments. But anyways, to our audience, thank you so much for listening and checking us out. We appreciate it. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We appreciate your comments. Also email in at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. That's the number 4. We appreciate all your emails. We will read them and respond to them on the air, as well as your comments. Again, you can find us on YouTube and Soundcloud. Soundcloud is the preferable way to listen, but if you're a YouTube kind of person, feel free to do that too.
Also, please, if you decide to contact us and want us to relay a message, make sure, if you want to stay anonymous, you let us know. Otherwise, we will post your name. We won't post your address or anything.
It's default non-anonymous.
Exactly. Also, if anybody is ever interested in hearing a certain topic, or maybe even participating with us, give us an email at quadrant4politics@gmail.com. We would love to have a guest on.
Well, we will take requests for topics, and if you live in the greater Seattle area, feel free to join in. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.
Take care.